And we are joined now by NewsNation political editor Chris Stirewalt. Good to see you, Chris. Powerful testimony today.
Yeah, really moving. And the first thing that came to me, the first thing that occurred to me, and we've thought about this before about January 6th, but thank God that one of our enemies did not use that moment, right? You can see how Russia or China or some other malevolent force in the world could have used this moment of utter chaos, right? This is a crazy thing to think about. The president of the United States lunging at the steering wheel, trying to go up to lead an armed mob attacking the Capitol. And you see even, how lucky we were, how blessed we were in that time that it wasn't far, far worse.
Do we have any sense of why this was an emergency hearing today? I mean, she didn't just come forward.
Well, I have no way of knowing why, but I can tell you that from my experience with covering past hearings, you might have a witness that you did not want to leak, and this would certainly fall into that category. And you wouldn't want to run it through the normal protocol so that there wouldn't be time to pre-butt. Or, who knows? There's certainly a lot of crazy people out there, or to menace the witness ahead of the hearing. Because certainly this was some of the most affecting testimony that we've heard so far.
It was incredible. So let's go through some of it bit by bit. What did you make of her testimony that Trump wanted to go to the Capitol, that he lunged, that he wanted the steering wheel and the Secret Service who were stopping him, he lunged at them?
Well, everybody always has known that Donald Trump has a very bad temper, and that has been for some of his supporters, part of the appeal, right? Trump's capacity for a deep anger is something that has satisfied a lot of his opponents or a lot of his supporters over time because they like the fact that he fought. But you can see here with the story about the throwing his food against the wall, putting his hands on the Secret Service agents and stuff like that, that this is a description of a person out of control, and that this is a description of a person who you start to see more clearly what the other constitutional crisis of the day was that Mike Pence was the one stepping in to call in the National Guard. Mike Pence was the one who was stepping in to exert executive authority, but the 25th Amendment hadn't been triggered. There was no constitutional means for Pence to do it. But according to this testimony, Trump was in no position to serve as commander-in-chief.
And we know the committee also interviewed Robert Engel himself, as Tom just reported. That's the Secret Service agent who was in question here. So why not hear directly from him today? Why rely on this secondhand account?
Well, you can imagine what the consequences would be if Congress started forcing Secret Service agents to testify about what they saw and heard, right? And the chilling effect that would have on the Secret Service's ability to do its job, of president's trust in the future of Secret Service agents. So this has to fall in a very different kind of category because these agents are supposed to forget everything they see and hear, right? We count on them to do that so that our state secrets can be kept and they can protect the president. So I'm sure that is a component, whether or not the Secret Service itself and their attorneys were involved or how they've negotiated this to try to protect future administrations and protect the agency. I don't know.
And she also testified, as we just heard, that Trump knew that some in the crowd were armed before urging them to march to the Capitol, but said they're not here to hurt me. Why is that piece of it important?
That if the president knew, and we have lots of other testimony to suggest that he did know, if the president knew that Mike Pence's life might be in danger, if the president knew that members of Congress's lives might be in danger, the dereliction involved there, where he, as the chief executive, has the duty to protect, right? He, acting in his function as commander-in-chief, has a duty to protect the Congress, duty to do those things. His knowledge about what was going on and the dangers that Pence and the members of Congress faced, that he would have allowed that to go on and not for hours intervene, that's very telling.
And also that testimony that he said Mike deserves it when he was hearing chants of hang Mike Pence.
He really hated Mike Pence, and certainly Bill Barr also. There's a story here for the normal Republicans, traditional Republicans, who sort of, and we've heard from a lot of those folks over the course of the initial weeks of testimony, normal Republicans who were trying to work in a kind of abnormal administration. By the end, with Pence and with Barr, Trump's fury at them for refusing to go along with his effort for this sort of self-coup, their refusal made him so angry, and you can just you can imagine how scary that must have been for Pence to know that here is the guy, and Pence had been almost a toady, like a very, very loyal supporter of the former president during his 4 years as vice president, and how quickly Trump turned on him and how deep that rage was.
Okay, so to what end is all of this? Will any of this result in any kind of criminal charges, any kind of criminal liability, or is it strictly political, a way to try to ensure he won't be president again?
Well, I'm sure it's a lot. I'm sure it's a lot of all of those things. And the first thing I would say is, at some point, we were going to have to make a record of all this, right? At some point, we were going to have to do this in a way that worked so that we could have this for sort of our legacy, so that we would all know what would happen. So that's a thing of value. I am sure that there will be criminal prosecutions further from the Justice Department. I doubt it will be the former president, but you could certainly see how somebody like the lawyer advising him, John Eastman, and others, who we know that some search warrants have been served. It's possible that there are other people who might face criminal charges. But I think the most important thing for all of us, regardless of our party, is to make a record of this, to know really what went on and wrap our heads around it so that we can put it in the past with the other tragedies of American history. We can know what happened, we can have a real accounting of it, and we can finally move on to good stuff. But you can't move on until you know all of what was in there.
But Chris, how much do Americans really care? I mean, did this testimony today change anyone's mind?
Oh, who knows? And that's not why we do this kind of stuff, right? It's not, each side looks at everything that comes through. Each party looks at everything that comes through. How can we help ourselves and hurt the other team? I understand that. I've covered politics for a long time, and I don't expect any different. But I will say, Congress still has to do its duty. And sometimes you don't know going in what the long-term consequences will be. I will say this, Donald Trump's chances to be the Republican nominee in 2024 have been going down quite steadily through this, in my estimation, simply because you hear about this splenetic rage, this fury that he has, and the loss of self-control, and all of the things that are not necessary and damaging to a candidacy if Trump were to try to run again. So I think there are political consequences for Trump. I don't know that it changes anybody's mind per se, or as it relates to midterm elections or anything like that. But again, there's some stuff that, we just need Congress sometimes to do its job.
All right, Chris, thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.